Hi, and welcome to Visibility Unlimited and Visibility Unlimited Spotlight, the video portion to Visibility Unlimited, the podcast. I am very excited today to speak to Rob Salome. Nope. Did I say it right, Rob?
Salome.
Salome. Everyone's going to say she messes up everyone's last name because I ask you in advance and then all of a sudden I get nervous because I don't want to mess it up. And then I do.
There you go.
Rob Salome. Rob and I met on an airplane and we were seatmates and we started speaking about what we do. And then we got into an amazing conversation that I found out that he is a veteran, but he's so much more to that. That's his sound. So he's a veteran. He has been able to take his transferable skills into corporate America and to many other things. And I really wanted to break down a conversation about veterans in the workplace and what does that mean? How has it shifted? We're going to just have an open conversation about veterans are still under the DEI umbrella. We'll get into that a little later. So welcome, Rob.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it, Leslie. I'm glad to spend some time with you again.
Thank you. So let's just jump in. You've had an amazing military career. And your military career was not the average military career, let's just be honest. You were high ranking, you were airborne, you were in some of the most elite opportunities that military has to offer. Can you share some of that?
Sure. Yeah. Went to West Point and graduated in 1994. And over the course of the next 23 years, I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, the 173rd Airborne, the 101st Airborne. I spent combat time in Iraq, Afghanistan, Kosovo, so all over the world, doing what our nation needed. I spent 2 years working in the White House as the Vice President's military aide. And then I served in various other positions, the last one being that I was the garrison commander of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, the third largest military base in the world, or army base in the world, and where I was in charge of helping veterans transition out of the army into the workforce. And that was about 500 soldiers a month. So I focused on it quite a bit.
Right. What does that mean to transition? I've spoken to several veterans, and of course, it depends on who you are. But we know that our soldiers don't always come back prepared to jump into a workforce that may be very different than many people join, the services for discipline or for other opportunities. What do you find or what do you see as you're helping?
Sure, sure. Well, I think that we probably underestimate as service members that the military is creates a culture for us to thrive in. And as a result of that, we enjoy those interactions with each other, and we have our own unique language and unique expectations, unique uniforms, and so we create a comfortable environment for us to do what the nation has asked us to do. And then when we exit, we think that and may not even realize, if you're like me, I was 18 years old when I first started wearing a uniform. I didn't know that when I left the military, I was going to be entering something that didn't feel the same.
Right.
And no one talked to me about that. And I was a colonel, and so
Wow.
how could I not know this? Right.
Right.
Um, and it really was very different. And so it's something that, you have to jump into, and it's important that you're prepared for that.
But I guess it's whose responsibility is it to prepare? Because if it's, and I'm not comparing it to dancing, but when you say that, that made me think of being trained as a classical ballerina. You were only supposed to think about dancing. You weren't supposed to think
Sure.
about anything else. There's nothing else in the world that matters. You do the task at hand.
Hmm. Hmm.
Army, Navy, Marines, all of them, task at hand. But at
Right.
some point, you have to transition out. And if there's no one, I guess, within the world for what you are used to working with, you step out. no one's going to take the time with you at a job to transition you through. They expect you to show up and be ready. So I
That's right.
guess, how do you personally make that transition, which is different because again, you are high ranking, but it could be good or be bad, right? Because
Sure.
you're ready to go. But
Sure.
how does someone make that transition if no one's speaking about it?
Yeah, I think it's hard because I think that the military has programs that are supposed to ease that process. I don't know. I think that they were designed by people who are still inside that system,
Mhm.
and not outside that system, and so they don't reflect the reality of what the cultural shift really is because the people who are setting the rules have never truly made the shift from, we have to remember what a small percentage of our country the military represents. It is less than 1%. Now, when you're in the military, you think that everybody knows what you've done and how important you are, and everyone's going to say thank you for your service, and they're going to kind of cut you a break, maybe.
Right.
That's not true. But most people don't even know someone who's in the military in most parts of America. And they will say thank you for service. And I think that they sincerely will be thankful. But that doesn't mean that they're going to ignore all the other requirements that they have in their professional roles to meet expectations and have high standards and know that results are expected regardless of what your background is. And so if you think that you're going to get cut a break, you probably need to um, think again. So your question was who's responsible for it?
Mhm.
Um, it's the individual, first of all. They have to take ownership
Yes.
of their future role. I think that it would be great if the military would listen a little bit more to the people who've already made the transition and not assume that they know. I think that there's a lot of very senior officers who believe they know what transitioning soldiers need to do. And I think that while they're in the military, that senior officers know what needs to be done. When it comes to getting out of the military, I don't think they have a clue because they've never done it before. And so most people shouldn't speak on things that they've never done. Um,
Say
that's
that
just a
again for the
general.
people in the back.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and then I think that there's a ton of really great resources that are doing good work out there.
Mhm.
Nonprofits that are trying to make this transition as easy as possible.
Right.
Uh, and then I think that a lot of companies are trying to make it as easy as possible as well. So everyone's trying, but the responsibility never comes off the individual service member who has retired or left the service to take care of themselves and their families.
And I mean, the biggest thing out of that is for those that are still there, why are you telling people how to transition when you've never done it yourself? Realistically, so
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a blind spot, honestly. I mean, you live in a world where, in the same way that in the 20th century, leaders at the top of their organization knew everything. I think
right.
that in the military, you have senior officers who are at the top of the organization and they know everything.
Mhm.
And so, that they know that too. And the people who run those programs oftentimes were in the military and went very shortly after they left the service and started running these programs, but they're now in civilian clothes.
Right.
And then they outsource a good portion of the counseling and coaching and running the programs to the lowest bidder. And so, even though they're great Americans who are running and working in those jobs, sometimes you have people who are, let's just say that a mid-level young soldier, sailor,
Mhm.
airman, marine, with a rank of E5, they might make anywhere from 35 to $45,000 a year. And so as they come out of the service, they may expect that they want to find a job to make 35 to $45,000 a year. Okay. Well, the people who are coaching and counseling them to pursue these jobs aren't making 35 to $45,000 a year.
Right.
And so how can we expect, I mean, it's just the system's not designed ideally to achieve the outcomes
That
that
are needed.
it's set up to do. That's right.
Right. I mean, look, years ago, and we're talking way back when, um, newspaper stands were meant for veterans to come
Mm,
home and run them.
mm,
Now we know that's not so much the case, if you can
hmm.
even find one. But that was supposed to be United States or government's opportunity to say, at least you have something to transition to, teach you how to run this business. They're
Hmm.
here for
Hmm.
you. I'm sure, like you said, there are programs, there are things, there are those transition. But let's also think about what level, like you said, that you've come out of the military in. Depends on what you're looking for. What
Hmm.
culture, nationality are you? What neighborhoods are you going back home to? What is available for where you are about to transition back to?
That's
And
right.
I'm pretty sure that is not taken into consideration. It is you served our country, now go for it. Which comes into why veterans were part of and still are under the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion umbrella. I know some veterans say, I don't want that. That's not, we want something separate. And I'm saying,
Hmm.
I don't disagree, maybe. But for today, 2024, veterans are under the umbrella. So when I hear take away, let's get rid of programs, I'm like, woo, 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 woo. Can we please have a conversation about who and what you're speaking about? Race, gender, LGBTQ plus, disability sight seen and unseen, and veterans are all benefiting if the programs are done correctly
Hmm.
from the opportunity to share this unique skills that they have. Because I will always say that and believe that anyone that has served comes home with unique skills that the rest of us may never know or understand, whether it's problem solving, critical thinking, but how do you take it from a field or a different country into a workspace?
Sure, sure. Yeah, that's absolutely a challenge. And I think that in the same way that uh, if we were to, as military service members, go into a different culture, we might try and understand that culture that we're about to go into.
Mhm.
I think that you have to really consider that as you enter the civilian workforce, which is really 99% of America that isn't in the military,
Right.
that there's going to be language differences and there's going to be behavior differences and there's going to be expectations that are even time, the way you perceive time. In the military, things are very rapid, and you think that you look at your day time in terms of days and weeks, and in the private sector, oftentimes many professions are really working in months and years, in the way that things just don't move as fast, and they're not designed to move as fast based on the market that they or the sector that they're operating in. So you have to have that reality, and I think that some people who do it well spend a lot of time developing a network, asking questions, taking ownership of their own future, and learning, actively learning. But you have to aggressively pursue it.
I'm going to always say, I don't care who we're speaking about, if you are bringing people to the table that don't look like you, sound like you, work like you, think like you need to have the people that you are trying to serve and help be at the table to help
Hmm.
create what types of systems. I have
Hmm.
another friend who is high ranking military, and he said to me he is now in banking, private sector, and he said, I think it's a real setup for most veterans coming home because exactly what you said. People will say, thank you for your service, and you'll get hired, and they may not have the skills, or they may not just be able to transfer those skills in the way that they're needed
Hmm.
in a different discipline.
Hmm. Yeah, well, and I think that you have to be humble enough to recognize that I can't expect to have the same level of authority in a brand new career or brand new workforce situation that I had in my previous role in the military.
Mhm.
That I mean, if we were to reverse those and say someone leaving the private sector as a general manager was to come in and be expected to be treated like a 15-year veteran in the military, we wouldn't allow that. And so the same is true in the private sector. And I think that you have to realize that if you're humble and then and you try and learn the culture of the new place that you're at, you can very quickly achieve great things because you achieve great things when you're in the military, but you have to give it a chance.
Right. So it comes back to as well, I think offices, HR, companies also have to recognize that if you are going to open your door and be inclusive, again, you must understand the culture from which they've come from as well. You must set people up to succeed. And
Hmm.
is that a mentor as they're coming in, which I
Hmm.
say for everyone, right? If you're coming into a
Hmm.
place and there's a great mentor system, process, procedure that, here, let me help you figure this out.
That's right. And most cities, even ones that are distant from military installations, have veteran support services available to where that can be found.
Mhm.
And if you're serious about hiring veterans, it's an amazing resource. But you also have to recognize that there is a system for it that's built. I mean, the Department of Labor has a system where they have something called American Job Centers, which are literally in every community in America. And inside of those American Job Centers, they have two roles. One's called a DVOB and the other one's called a lever. And I forget which one is which, but one is there for the companies to come to and say, I'd like to hire a veteran. And the
Mhm.
other one is for the veteran to come to as they're going into this new town of Albuquerque, New Mexico, or whatever it is, and
Right.
say, hey, I'm relocating from the Army and I am coming to Albuquerque and I'm looking for a role. Can you help me? And that DVOB and that lever are supposed to work together through the American Job Center
Okay.
as a point of contact to do that. And so when a soldier's leaving and they're going to someplace where there's not a big army base, that's or a military base, that's what they're told to do is to go contact their American Job Center and look for that person. That position is not always filled. And so the system begins to break down rather quickly.
Right.
But that's the system.
And so here we have the cycle again. The cycle of systems is what I like to call it. We have great ideas. We don't implement and we don't make impact. And everywhere. There's some that I'm sure are doing great. And if you listen to this and you want me to share, please, I'm happy to share where. But probably more often than not, that disconnect is happening.
Sure, sure, and like you said, for all of those populations that are part of the DEI umbrella, perhaps that there is a system designed to help them that may be breaking down somewhere,
Yes,
and it's important to understand what it is, where it's broken, and then how do we compensate for the fact that it's broken. But it doesn't mean that we should cast out the opportunities and that seems to be what we see, and I can speak for the military, is that you give the military person a shot, and the first time you try it doesn't work, and therefore you never give another military person a shot again, right? And that's true. I can't speak for all those other populations, but
I'm going to say we're all very similar on that.
there you go.
One person has to hold their entire identity on their shoulders that is not their responsibility to do.
That's right. But they
Yeah,
carry the weight for everybody else who will come behind them.
right.
Right. And so I think it's important that for those of us who have made the transition to try and be ambassadors as best we can to help people understand that there is a system. It's not perfect, but we have to try and make it work. And in the meantime, recognize that we can't expect someone to give us the answers or give us a handout.
Absolutely. I know you were about to tell me a story when we started about an HR person that you've run into where they kind
Sure,
of changed the
sure.
system.
Yeah, so I was talking with the HR director of a company that they're relocating into the area where I live. They have about 300 employees that they're hiring over the next 6 months, putting leaders in place. And because I live near a military base, they want to hire a military population. And so I asked them. I said, "Well, tell me about what do you think about hiring military? I mean, do you consider them to be a group? Is it individuals that you're hiring, or is it members of a group? Like, how do you look at that? And she said, well, it's just individuals. And I said, well, okay. Like, if that person was Latino, would you consider them as just an individual, or would you consider maybe their culture that they bring with them, or if they were Asian or whatever? And she said, well, I'd probably consider their culture. And I said, well, the military has a culture too. And that, as you think about hiring them, you need to consider that you need to at least make the effort to understand what is the culture that they're transitioning from and entering into, and how can you support that culture. And it might not be super hard, but you should consider, like, do I give them the opportunity to meet as a group? Do I allow them to provide us feedback on how we're doing, since we've never had a significant
Right.
military population, so that we can do that. What would be their expectations? Have you considered that? How do they view time? All of those unique things, because it is a culture, and they're used to that.
And there's cultures within subcultures of
Exactly.
we
Yeah,
spoke we
sure.
spoke about we
We
spoke
did
about
on the
that on the
plane.
plane.
Yeah,
You
we
know I was
did.
gonna let you get away with that.
Sure. Well, and when you think about it, I was talking with a gentleman who was a submarine captain. Well, he's probably different than the captain of an aircraft carrier or a pilot. And those are subcultures within the Navy. And in the Army, I know for sure that there's subcultures based on what your job is and where you're stationed and the career path that you followed. And so those all have subcultures. And so respecting those cultures is an important part of assimilating successfully those military folks in. And the benefits are immense once you recognize the advantages that come with that, because there are incredible advantages to hiring folks that were in the military. I mean, I mean, you can guess what they are, but there's the discipline, there's them showing up on time, there's doing what they said they were going to do. I mean, all those things that many people have heard before are still true. But when you look at where it fails, it's because of maybe just not putting the effort into appreciating the cultural norms that they are adjusting from in order to join your cultural norms inside of your organization.
Expectations is a big word for me. I love that word. I felt I really do ask that question a lot. What are your expectations of me? What are the expectations of the job? What should I expect from you? you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
how do we
yeah.
move together? And I think, again, most people are scared to ask those questions. I'm sure if you are not of a certain level, even within service, you don't speak. You speak when you're spoken to, you don't ask those types of questions coming in. And so I think that's where the disconnect for many people in and out of the service
Sure.
really happens. But I can really see it happening. Service, I'm going to take what I get, but everything doesn't fit. And that can even be for the job, like, oh, I am going to be very excited because I can say I have veterans, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But like you said, did you do your research? Did you speak with other veterans? Do you have a culture, a company culture for which a veteran can walk into, just like Black, Latino, someone with a disability, anyone that doesn't look like you, sound like you, walk like you, can they, and even if they look like you, sound like you, and walk like you, that still comes from a different culture of work, how do you make sure you have an inclusive environment and one that communicates to understand the expectations of each other?
Sure, sure. Well, and I think that I really appreciate that you're saying expectations, because so many organizations will show you a job description and equate that to expectations. And those are not the same thing.
No.
And I think that it's important for any business to respect the responsibility to communicate expectations with as much clarity as possible, and don't downplay that, because people perform better when they have clear expectations. It's just true.
Absolutely. Yes. We know what we need to do, where we need to go. And I think when we build these expectations of each other and when we're working with cultures that may be newer to our company culture, you've got to be able to bob and weave. You've got to be open enough to say, hey, that didn't work. That maybe that wasn't the way we thought it was going to do. Now that you're here, what do you see? What do I see? Can we move this? And I think we get caught in a juggernaut so many times of, well, the process and procedure doesn't say that. And you just lost
Mm,
someone that just needed a internal mentor, a different conversation, a new opportunity, and you've lost someone that's very good and now disappointed or disparaged about what it
yeah,
looks like to come home.
sure, sure. Well, and quite honestly, when you communicate expectations with clarity, it works both ways. I mean, the employer can hold someone responsible for meeting expectations, but in the same way, if you as an employee have met the expectations that they communicated, and in case you can prove that you've exceeded those expectations, like they keep giving you things because you can handle so much because you're a high achiever. Well, now you have grounds to say, I met your expectations and I did all these other things too. I think we should talk about a raise. So, I mean, it can work both ways. And I think that expectations are a tremendous tool that might not necessarily be leveraged as much as it could be.
Absolutely. Now, you made the transition. And again, I'm going to point out you were very high ranking. You have that personality of get it and make it happen, move on, let's make it happen some more. How do we bring others in? We've had this conversation. But again, so many did not get to that rank, will not get to that rank, will do their time and come home.
Mhm.
How do you have that conversation with them to transition? Like, what are the top three things if you could say to someone, here's three things, regardless of rank, you need to know? And then the high ranking ones, because they're a different issue as well, some of them.
Sure, sure. Well, I think first of all, let's put down the myth that high rank equals easy transition. Because I would tell you that of the folks that I've talked to that were senior officers and senior non-commissioned officers, they're highly qualified when they're leaving the military, and they may expect that that they can step into these jobs easily, and that people will understand all that they did in the service, and it's just not true. And so there's a significant, you can expect to take a pay cut, just expect it, and a responsibility decrease as well until you prove yourself, and you can prove yourself rapidly, but you have to be willing to come in at a lower level to do that. Now, in terms of, I want to get to your principal question is, regardless of your rank, um, you need to have confidence that the skills that you have are transferable. And so don't feel like you have to communicate that if I was a military police officer, I have to be a police officer when I get out and do that. No, but you do have, you know how to act in a high stress situation. You know how to do this. You know how to do that. And so there are lots of skills that you have that are transferable. And in the process of networking, have discussions with people about how those skills are transferable and learn how to convey them in unique ways. Because I think that you have to be able to communicate well the skills that you had, and not how they were valuable in the military, but how they will be valuable to another employer. And so learning that language and how you want to communicate your own capability is super important. I think the second thing probably, and again, she didn't tell me this question in advance, just so everybody knows, is I think the second thing is to network. You have to get out and meet people and understand the world that you're stepping into, and ask for help. It's not something that's normal to military people, is asking for help. And so get out there, build a network, ask for help, admit that you don't know everything, because you don't, and just learn as much as you can. And the network is how you do it, and ask for help because people are willing to help you. And then I think that the third thing I would say is expect to have to prove yourself. And you may say, well, this many years or that many years of this kind of thing or that kind of thing. Well, all those people out there who were working in the private sector, they're earning their keep too, and there are just as many people who are getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning and going to the gym in the private sector as there are in the military. And they're working hard and they're earning their keep and they're pulling late nights and they're working on weekends and they're all the things that you think that nobody does outside the military, it's getting done. That's what makes America great. And so it's happening. And don't assume that everyone else is some sort of sluggard as compared to you in the military, and get out there and work hard and prove yourself.
I love that. I love all three of those. Thank you. Yeah, there's one thing that I will say that I hear when I go into different office spaces. And if there's a conflict that arises, and I'll hear, oh, but they were in the military. Okay, would you like to share with me what that means? So before I speak to them, what does that mean to you? Oh, well, they expect everyone to work the way that they work. Okay,
Mm,
so they're your supervisor. Okay, have you spoken? Yes, but they don't want to stay. It's ranking in order. And I think having that conversation, not saying it may change because we all are individuals, but what you said, understanding that if you go into a work sector and you do rise up, so we speak about your work in a moment where you're dealing with other CEOs and sharing how they can be great leaders, you
hmm
also have to understand that you just can't speak up high and you can't shout down below, but you have to
mm,
understand what everyone is doing in the organization and how they have a role within. And I keep hearing that a lot, that that's an issue sometimes once some veterans do succeed, and that if they're not on the lever, they don't have anything to do with anyone else.
mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah. I feel sad when I hear that because um, leadership is about being a servant in, in my mind. And so that doesn't mean that there aren't those in the military who come out of the military thinking that they are supposed to be served. That just wasn't my experience in the military. The higher I got, the more I felt like I was serving the people underneath me because they were doing all the work. And it, the high ranking folks work pretty hard too. And so you have to recognize that in every company that there are people who are working pretty hard to get things onto the shelves of their clients, whether if it's a distribution company. One of our local companies here that I know is they're a beverage distribution company. Well, there are veterans that drive their trucks, and there are veterans that load the pallets, and there are veterans that that sell the goods. And I mean, so those folks are working hard at every level to do all those different jobs, and they're all important. And whether they're veterans or they're not, they still deserve to be treated with respect because they're contributing to the bottom line.
And it comes down to what we said before, is about individual. And I don't think any of us want to be tagged. We want to be seen.
Mm,
Well, and we want
mm,
to be recognized for the skills that we bring, whether it's culture or language or military, it's the discipline. We all come with different things. And I think for any employer that is looking to hire veterans, anyone in the DEI umbrella, to keep an open mind, and again, to build systems and structure where people can succeed.
that's right. Yeah. Well said.
You know?
Well said.
Can you, anything else you'd like to add that you want people to really know about what to look for, or anything for your,
Yeah. I guess, one of the things that you said earlier is people will say, well, they were military, and there's certain biases that are carried with that. And I think that it's important to be willing to question your biases, whether you're a veteran going into a company or you're that person who's hiring a veteran. Be willing to set aside your biases long enough to give that person an opportunity to prove themselves, because it's important that we do it. And I know you kind of said that, but I just can't say enough how important that is because that's not just true when you're trying to hire a veteran. It's kind of true all the time. Is that biases can be helpful in making decisions, but they can also be harmful if they're not used with intentionality.
Love that. I will end it there. Rob, you are amazing. I'm so happy we were able to do this. Where can people find you if they have, I don't know, just questions or just want to say thank you for your service?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me, Rob Salome, Salome. You can also check out the company that I work for called solutions21.com, where we help executives grow their leadership teams.
I love that. And you hire a lot of veterans as well.
That's right. That's
I
right.
I appreciate you. Thank you for your service again.
Thank you for your support, Leslie. I appreciate you having me on today.
Absolutely. Everyone, as always, thank you. You know, you can find the podcast on our YouTube channel for the video and then all your favorite podcast stations. I'm Leslie Short, your host and the owner of the Cavu Group. Keep watching and keep listening to Visibility Unlimited. Thank you.